Welcome to FDA Grand Rounds. My name is Rakesh Raghuvanshi in the Office of the Chief Scientist. Today's lecture is Postmarket Regulation of Cosmetic Products, the who, what, when, why, and how. Your speakers today are Elizabeth Petro. She's a supervisory chemist and branch chief of the Cosmetics Regulatory Activities Branch. Megumi Yamamoto, who is a chemist, project manager for cosmetic registration and listing in the Cosmetics Regulatory Science Branch, and Janavi Srinivasan, director of the Division of Cosmetics. All three are from the Office of Cosmetics and Colors within the Office of the Chief Scientist at the Food and Drug Administration. I will now hand it off to Elizabeth Petro, who will start things off for us today. Elizabeth?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here today with my colleagues from the Division of Cosmetics, and we're here to talk about post-market regulation of cosmetic products, the who, what, when, why, and how. As Rakesh mentioned, our talk will be in three parts. So the first part will be from me, Elizabeth Petro. I'm going to talk about the overview of U.S. cosmetics regulatory framework. Then my colleague Megumi Yamamoto will tell us about registration and listing of cosmetic product facilities and products. And my colleague Janavi Srinivasan will tell us about post-market regulation of cosmetic products, adverse event reporting. My name is Elizabeth Petro. As Rakesh said, I'm the branch chief for the Cosmetics Regulatory Activities Branch. I'm going to tell you about an overview of U.S. cosmetics regulatory framework. This is a disclaimer just to clarify that any mention of commercial products or organizations does not imply any endorsement by the United States government. So we're the Division of Cosmetics in FDA, and a reorganization dated October 1st, 2024, many cosmetics regulatory functions, including the work that my team of 14 and I do, were organized into the Office of the Chief Scientist, which is within the Office of the Commissioner in FDA. FDA's authority over cosmetics comes from 4 statutes passed by Congress, the first of which is the 1938 Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Around that time, there was a product called Lash Lure, which was a eyelash dye that caused people to go blind. And because of the injuries and even deaths from dangerous cosmetics at that time, inspired Congress to include cosmetics into the 1938 Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, giving FDA additional authority over cosmetics since the 1906 Pure Food and Drugs Act, which established FDA 120 years ago this year. In 1960, Congress passed the color additive amendments to the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, giving FDA pre-market authority over color additives in FDA-regulated commodities, including cosmetics. In 1966, Congress passed the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act, which gave FDA additional labeling authority over cosmetics that are also consumer products. And very excitingly, December 29th, 2022, Congress passed the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act, or MoCRA, giving FDA significant new authority over cosmetics for the first time since 1938. So you may be wondering, what is a cosmetic? A cosmetic is defined in Section 201I of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which you can also look up in Title 21 of U.S. Code, Section 321. The term cosmetic means articles that are intended to be rubbed, poured, sprinkled, or sprayed on, introduced into, or otherwise applied to the human body, or any part thereof for cleansing, beautifying, promoting attractiveness, or altering the appearance. And articles intended for use, as a component of any such articles, except that such terms shall not include soap. Now, when I tell my neighbors at a block party or extended family or other colleagues about the work that I and my team do, I have on multiple occasions gotten the response, well, Elizabeth, it's great that you and your team are keeping cosmetics safe in this country. I'm really glad you're doing that. But, you know, I don't use cosmetics. So in order to illustrate how broad this definition is, I've prepared a list of examples of cosmetics I've used so far today. It is a little afternoon here in the Eastern Time Zone. And so far today, I've washed my hands, so I've used a moisturizing hand soap. I took a shower, so I used a moisturizing bath bar, or what a layperson might call a bar of soap. I washed my hair, so I used shampoo, conditioner, a facial cleanser. I brushed my teeth, so I used toothpaste, I used deodorant. I have this very long hair that's prone to tangling, so I use a detangling leave-in conditioning spray, and I've used lip balm and moisturizing hand cream all today, this morning, Thursday, February 5th. I was once at a conference where someone who really should have known better made some disparaging comments about the kind of people who let their children use cosmetics. So I've also prepared a list of cosmetics that my children use on a regular basis. They're age 9, 9, and 6. Hand washing, always a best practice. They use lots of moisturizing hand soap. They use lip balm. They love fancy scented hand cream, fancy scented bath bars. They use baby shampoo. My daughters love to use conditioner and the detangling leave-in conditioning spray. They brush their teeth, so they use toothpaste. My children love nail polish, so I love nail polish remover. My children love temporary tattoos, face paint, hair chalk. There's this product called bath paint that's like a body paint meant for the bathtub that supposedly doesn't make a mess. So we also use lots of baby wipes, which are applied to the human body for the purpose of cleansing and are regulated as cosmetics by the United States. So if you get nothing else from my talk today, I hope that you appreciate how broad this definition is, that most Americans, including children, use multiple cosmetics every day, and it's FDA's job to keep them safe. We're very excited about the passage of MoCRA, of course, but I do want to make the point that FDA did have authority over the safety of cosmetics under the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act before the passage of MoCRA, and FDA continues to use these older provisions of the Act to keep cosmetics safe in this country. So for example, if a cosmetic contains a poisonous or deleterious substance that renders it injurious under the labeled or customary conditions of use, for example, if a hairspray contains methylene chloride or if a tattoo ink contains dangerous bacteria, FDA can and does take action against those products as adulterated cosmetics. If a cosmetic is misbranded, for example, if it does not disclose material facts on the label that are necessary for the safe use of the cosmetic, FDA can and does take action on those misleading cosmetic products as well. So FDA has a lot of authority over cosmetics besides what I'm going to talk about in MoCRA today. But in the interest of time, we are going to skip ahead and tell you about MoCRA. Congress passed this act December 29th, 2022. As you can see from the slide, there are many, many provisions under this act. In the interest of time, I will not be covering all of these in detail. For example, my colleague John V. Srinivasan is going to give a presentation later this afternoon specifically about adverse events. One important provision of MoCRA is addressing good manufacturing practice, or GMP. MoCRA requires FDA to establish GMPs by regulation. MoCRA directs FDA that these regulations should be consistent to the extent practicable and appropriate with national and international standards. The intent of this law is clear: to protect public health and to ensure that cosmetic products are not adulterated. These authorities, these regulations may include records inspections to evaluate compliance with GMPs, and FDA has been directed to take into account various considerations such as size and scope of businesses, risks to public health posed by cosmetics, and we've been directed to provide sufficient flexibility to the regulated industry. Our proposed rule is ongoing. MoCRA included aggressive timelines, and we've been directed to issue a final rule not later than December 29th, 2025. In order to comply with the directive to gather input from the regulated industry, we did hold a public listening session on June 1st, 2023. We accepted comments into the docket, and that comment period closed on July 3rd, 2023. In the interest of time, I am not going to address registration and product listing because my colleague Megumi Yamamoto will be giving a presentation specifically about this topic immediately after mine, so please stay tuned. MoCRA includes provisions for safety substantiation. A responsible person is required to ensure and maintain records supporting adequate safety substantiation for their product, where adequate substantiation of safety means tests, studies, or other evidence or information that is considered among experts qualified by scientific training and experience to evaluate the safety of cosmetic products and their ingredients, sufficient to support a reasonable certainty that the product is safe, where safe means that the product and ingredients are not injurious to users under the conditions of use prescribed in the labeling or under such conditions of use as are customary or usual. MoCRA includes several sections addressing labeling. One new labeling requirement is for professional use only cosmetics. So if a cosmetic is for professional use only, it must include a clear and prominent statement on the label that the product shall be administered or used only by licensed professionals. This provision of the law is currently effective. It went to effect December 29th, 2023. Another new labeling requirement under MoCRA is that all cosmetic product labels must include contact information such as domestic address, phone number, or electronic contact information through which the responsible person can receive adverse event reports. And this provision of the labeling requirements is also effective as of December 29th, 2024. Yet another labeling provision of MoCRA is that MoCRA requires FDA to develop regulations to identify fragrance allergens that must be disclosed on cosmetic labels. FDA has been directed to take into consideration international, state, and local allergen disclosure requirements. We are in the process of issuing a proposed rule, and MoCRA has directed us to issue a final rule not later than 180 days after the close of the comment period for the proposed rule. So please stay tuned. MoCRA also includes provisions addressing records, mandatory recall authority, and records inspection. As far as records inspection, MoCRA amends the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to provide that FDA inspections of facilities that manufacture or process cosmetics shall extend to certain records and information, such as adverse event report information, when the applicable standard for records inspection applies. And if certain conditions are met, FDA can access and copy certain records related to a cosmetic product, including safety records. And I'm very excited to report to you that just last month, on January 21st, 2026, FDA issued a draft guidance for industry on this topic entitled FDA Records Access Authority for Cosmetic Products. The reason we submitted a draft guidance is that we want your feedback. So please, please, please submit your comments at regulations.gov. We want to hear from you so that we can consider your comments before we finalize the guidance document. As Rakesh said, these slides will be made available following the presentation, so you can follow that hyperlink right there to submit your comments. We do want to hear from you. MoCRA also includes provisions for mandatory recall authority. If FDA determines that there is a reasonable probability that a cosmetic is adulterated or misbranded, and the use of or exposure to the cosmetic will cause serious adverse health consequences or death, FDA has the authority to order a mandatory recall if the responsible person refuses to do so voluntarily. And I'm also very happy to report that we also very recently, just in December of 2025, published a draft guidance document on this topic entitled Questions and Answers Regarding Mandatory Cosmetics Recalls. Similarly, the comment period is open. Please read the draft guidance document. Please submit your comments so that we can take them into consideration before we finalize the guidance document. MoCRA includes certain exemptions for small business and other certain products and facilities. So MoCRA exempts certain small businesses, by which we mean a facility with an average gross annual sales in the United States of less than $1 million over a 3-year period, from GMP, registration, and product listing requirements. And such exemptions do not apply to the manufacturers or facilities that manufacture the following cosmetic products. Products that regularly come into contact with the mucous membrane of the eye under customary or usual conditions of use, products that are injected, products that are intended for internal use, and products that are intended to alter the appearance for more than 24 hours under customary usual conditions of use, and removal by the consumer is not part of such use. So if you're manufacturing any of those products, then even if you have gross annual sales less than $1 million over a 3-year period, you are still required to comply with GMP registration product listing requirements. MoCRA also provides exemptions for certain products and facilities that are subject to requirements for drugs and devices. The idea being that if you're already in compliance with the drug listing registration requirements for your product, you do not need to list and register separately under the cosmetic provisions. MoCRA also included a section addressing talc-containing cosmetics. MoCRA directed FDA to promulgate regulations to establish standardized testing methods for detecting and identifying asbestos in talc-containing cosmetic products. A proposed rule entitled Testing Methods for Detecting and Identifying Asbestos in Talc-Containing Cosmetic Products was published December 27, 2024. And although the proposed rule was withdrawn on November 25, 2025, FDA will issue a proposed rule to meet its statutory obligations. MoCRA provides a timeline that the final rule will be issued not later than 180 days after the close of the comment period for the proposed rule. In the interest of time, I am not going to cover every single aspect of MoCRA in this 15-minute presentation, so I am highlighting some provisions that I did not mention in this presentation. So if you're interested in learning more, I encourage you to read the statute. And once again, these slides will be made available and you can follow the link to read the statute. So in summary, MoCRA introduced some new requirements for industry. MoCRA introduced new authorities and directives to FDA. You can keep in touch with us by following updates on our webpage. We have a designated webpage for the Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act where we post all of our updates. If you scan this QR code, it should take you to that webpage. You can follow us on X at FDA Cosmetics. You can register for updates on our cosmetics news and events webpage. You can read about news and events there. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you will see this box where you can subscribe, and then you'll get an automated email notification whenever that webpage is updated. If you have more questions, please reach out to FDA's Food and Cosmetics Information Center. Their contact information is listed here. We have designated information specialists who want to talk to you and help you with your questions. So in the interest of time, that is all I'm going to say. And as Rakesh mentioned, we are going to address questions at the end. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Megumi Yamamoto, who is going to tell us about registration of cosmetic product facilities and listing of cosmetic products. Thank you, Megumi.
Thank you. So good afternoon, and thank you for joining this portion of the presentation on cosmetic registration and listing under MoCRA. I am Megumi Yamamoto, the project manager for registration and listing at FDA's Office of Cosmetics and Colors. Today's session will cover what registration listing is, who must comply, what information is collected, and how to successfully navigate the registration and listing process. As my colleague had mentioned, registration of certain cosmetic product facilities and listing of certain cosmetic products with FDA is part of MoCRA, providing us with unprecedented visibility into the cosmetic marketplace and enhanced tools to protect public health. MoCRA, among other requirements, establishes two core requirements. The first, owners and operators of facilities engaging in manufacturing or processing of cosmetic products for distribution in the United States must register their facilities with FDA and renew their registration every 2 years. The second, the responsible person of a cosmetic product must list each marketed cosmetic product with the FDA, including product ingredients, and provide any updates annually. As defined by MoCRA, responsible person means the manufacturer, packer, or distributor of a cosmetic product whose name appears on the label of such cosmetic product in accordance with Section 609A of the FD&C Act or Section 4A of the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act. Facility registration gives us insight into who is manufacturing or processing cosmetic products and where, while product listing provides detailed information about what cosmetics products are being marketed. Together, they are valuable resources for FDA to effectively monitor the cosmetic product marketplace. There are certain small businesses that are exempt from cosmetic product facility registration and product listing requirements. For purposes of MoCRA, a small business is defined under Section 612 of the FDNC Act. It refers to the responsible persons and owners and operators of facility whose average gross annual sales of cosmetic products in the United States for the previous 3-year period is less than $1 million when adjusted for inflation, and who do not engage in the manufacturing or processing of certain cosmetic products described in Section 612B of the FDNC Act. Okay, so under 612B, regardless of their average gross annual sales, businesses that engage in manufacturing or processing of the following cosmetic products are not exempt from the registration and listing requirements. Those are products that come regularly in contact with the mucous membrane of the eye under normal use, products that are injected, products intended for internal use, or products intended to alter the appearance for more than 24 hours under customary or usual conditions of use, and removal by the consumer is not part of such use. Exemptions also exist for certain products and facilities that are subject to requirements for drugs and devices. So FDA has developed a guidance to support industry compliance. Our final guidance document was updated in December of 2024 and explains, among other things, the statutory requirements, definitions, who is responsible for making the submissions, what information to include in the submissions, how to make the submissions, and when to make the submissions. It also contains Appendix B, frequently asked questions and answers. FDA has developed an electronic submission portal, Cosmetics Direct, which resides within the FDA Direct system for industry to be able to submit their registration and listing. The system also supports ongoing updates and renewals. It's a structured product labeling, or SPL, authorizing tool that contains user-friendly data entry forms, performs initial validations, creates and saves the SPL submission, and submits the SPL to FDA for internal processing. It's a standardized XML-based format developed by Health Level 7 International and adopted by the FDA. It ensures the information is submitted in a consistent, machine-readable format, which allows for efficient processing and accuracy. Industry can also submit submissions through FDA's electronic submission gateway or any SPL authorizing software. And as an alternative tool, FDA has developed paper forms 5066 and 5067. FDA does strongly encourage electronic submissions to facilitate efficiency and timeliness of data submissions and management for the agency. So before submitting a facility registration, the owner or operator of a facility will need to obtain an FDA Establishment Identifier, or FEI. Many companies may already have an FEI from other FDA-regulated activities. The FEI portal allows lookup of FEI numbers based on the firm's name and address. If a firm does not have an FEI assigned by FDA, a request can be submitted to the FEI portal help desk. FDA is using the FEI as the Cosmetic Product Facility registration number. Therefore, if a cosmetic product is manufactured or processed at a facility that is not exempt from registration, the facility must be registered before a cosmetic product listing is submitted. Okay, so let's jump into the cosmetic product facility registration. So who submits facility registration? Section 607A1 of the FDNC Act requires every person that owns or operates a facility that engages in manufacturing or processing of cosmetic product for distribution in the United States to register each facility with the FDA. Certain small business, as defined in Section 612 of the FD&C Act, are exempt from cosmetic product facility registration requirements. Exemptions also exist for certain facilities that are subject to requirements for drugs and devices. In the case of contract manufacturer, a facility registration may be submitted by the facility or any responsible person whose products are manufactured or processed at such facility. Please refer to our previous slides or our guidance for additional details. So, when is registration submitted? The deadline for registering existing facilities that engaged in manufacturing or processing of a cosmetic product on December 29th of 2022 has passed. Every person that owns or operates a facility that first engaged after December 29th of 2022 in manufacturing or processing of a cosmetic product for distribution in the United States must have registered such facility within 60 days of first engaging in such activity or by February 27th of 2024, whichever was later. So thus, any facilities choosing to engage in such activities recently or in the future must register such facility within 60 days of first engaging in manufacturing or processing. FDA issued a guidance for industry explaining that FDA did not intend to enforce these requirements until July 1st of 2024 to help ensure the industry had sufficient time to submit registration information. For amended registration under Section 607A4 of the FD&C Act, every person who is required to register must update their registration within 60 days to reflect any changes to the information required for registration. This includes any changes that results in cancellation of the registration. For renewal of registration, every person who is required to register a facility must renew such registration biannually, every 2 years, according to Section 607A2 of the FD&C Act. FDA is providing for an abbreviated renewal of registration when no changes have been made since the previous submission. What information is submitted? In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of this, but the left side lists what information must be submitted, and the right side lists the additional optional information FDA requests to be submitted. FDA may suspend a facility's registration if the agency determines that a cosmetic product manufactured or processed by the registered facility and distributed in the United States has reasonable probability of causing serious adverse health consequences or death to humans, and the agency has a reasonable belief that other products manufactured or processed by the facility may be similarly affected because of a failure that cannot be isolated to a product or products, or is sufficiently pervasive to raise concerns about other products manufactured in the facility. So moving on to cosmetic product listing. So who submits product listing? Section 607C of the FD&C Act requires that for each marketed cosmetic product, the responsible person submit to FDA a cosmetic product listing. Certain small business, as defined in Section 612 of the FD&C Act, are exempt from cosmetic product listing requirements, and exemptions also exist for certain products that are subject to the requirements for drugs and devices. Please refer to our previous slides and our guidance for additional details. When is listing submitted? The deadline for listing a cosmetic product that was marketed on December 29, 2022 has passed. For a cosmetic product first marketed after December 29th of 2022, the responsible person must submit a cosmetic product listing within 120 days of marketing such product in interstate commerce. FDA issued a guidance for industry explaining that FDA did not intend to enforce these requirements until July 1st of 2024 to help industry had sufficient time to submit product listing information. For updates to cosmetic product listing, the responsible person must annually update listings, including discontinuation of products. In addition, FDA is providing for abbreviated process for the renewal of any cosmetic product listing as required under Section 607C3 for renewing listings with no changes since the previous submission. What information is submitted? The left side lists what information must be submitted, and the right side lists the additional optional information FDA requests to be submitted. Failure to register or submit listing information in accordance with Section 607 of the FDNC Act is a prohibited act under Section 301 HHH of the FDNC Act. Additionally, under Section 607 FC of the FDNC Act, no person shall introduce or deliver for introduction into commerce in the United States cosmetic products from a facility with a suspended registration. So this slide provides an overview of the cosmetic product facility registration and listing, showing the number of facilities that are registered and products listed with FDA under MoCRA. As of July 6 of 2026, we have over 14,000 unique active facilities registered and about 992,000 unique active cosmetic product listed. While electronic submission is not required, FDA strongly encourages electronic submissions to facilitate efficiency and timeliness of data submission and management for agency. And as a reminder, cosmetic product facility registration and cosmetic product listing is neither a cosmetic approval program nor a promotional tool. FDA does not issue certificates for cosmetic product facility registrations or cosmetic product listing. Recently, we marked the 2-year anniversary of the launch of Cosmetics Direct and the subsequent availability of the paper forms. As a reminder, cosmetic product facility registration must be renewed biannually. That means every 2 years from the date of initial registration. Also, FDA continues to work towards making relevant information from cosmetic product facility registration and listing available to the public to the extent permitted by law. So please visit our website periodically for the latest updates. And lastly, FDA is committed to supporting successful compliance with MoCRA requirements. Dedicated support channels are available for different types of questions and issues, including technical assistance. We also encourage you to follow our social media channels and sign up for email alerts to stay current on any updates or changes to the program. This concludes my portion of the presentation, and I will turn it over to my colleague, Janavi. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Megumi, for laying out how cosmetic products are regulated in the United States, and also for sharing how we're implementing requirements as mandated by MoCRA. So my name is Janavi Srinivasan. In the next 15 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking to you about adverse event reporting for cosmetic products. It's not. Thank you. Elizabeth already alluded to this, but it's worth repeating. Cosmetic ingredients, except if they're color additives, and cosmetic products are not subject to FDA's pre-market approval programs. So in lieu of that, post-market activities are so important for the FDA and play very important roles in safeguarding cosmetic products on the US market. Some examples of post-market activities and information that FDA collects from post-market surveillance include analyzing cosmetic adverse event reports submitted to the FDA for potential health issues. We also follow up on product complaints for possible product quality issues. FDA performs product surveys where we actually look at composition of the product, the cosmetic product on the market, as well as consumer surveys where we are interested in understanding use conditions by consumers of different cosmetic products. You already heard the many definitions in MoCRA specific to adverse events. MoCRA gave us adverse event definition, which is not very different from what is already in the FD&C Act. But what we got from MoCRA was what constitutes a serious adverse event. And that, as I have listed here, are the list of outcomes described in A that requires, as defined in B, based on reasonable medical judgment, a medical or surgical intervention to prevent these outcomes listed in A. These are added to the section 604 of the FD&C Act. Why would one want to submit adverse event reports to the FDA? As I said in a previous slide, FDA does post-market regulatory authority for cosmetic products. So it's very important for FDA to receive these adverse event report data to monitor safety of the cosmetic product that is on the market, to identify potential safety concerns that may be related to a marketed cosmetic product, and in a timely manner. FDA also uses information available in these reports to evaluate the seriousness of an adverse event and to evaluate, this is part of MoCRA, to evaluate the responsible person's compliance to reporting requirements. So I call this my before and after MoCRA slide. So prior to MoCRA, there were no requirements as such to report an adverse event. If you're a consumer, a patient, a health professional, or industry, prior to MoCRA, adverse event reporting was voluntary in nature. However, post-MoCRA, it's the same for consumers and health professionals, but MoCRA mandated that serious adverse events, as defined in Section 605 of the Act, was mandatory for industry responsible person. It is, however, voluntary for industry to report non-serious adverse events. Again, responsible person, as both Elizabeth and Megumi alluded to it, is defined in Section 604 of the FD&C Act. When would one report adverse events to the FDA? For consumers and health professionals, this has not changed. It's voluntary in nature, and there is no specific requirement for timelines of when to report. However, for industry, as mandated by MoCRA, this is required for industry to report to the FDA within 15 business days of receiving the serious adverse event report. This should be accompanied by a copy of the label on or within the retail packaging of that associated cosmetic product to an adverse event. Industry is also required to, within 1 year of that initial report to FDA any new and material medical information, again, within 15 business days of receipt of such information. Please note this is 15 business days and not 15 calendar days, as might be the case for other regulated products with the FDA. MoCRA also gave authority to FDA to be able to access adverse event report records during an inspection, which requires industry responsible persons to retain adverse event reports for 6 years with exclusions for small businesses. And small business definition is in Section 612 of the Act. For industry, again, there is no specific requirement if they are reporting non-serious adverse event reports, which is voluntary in nature. That brings me to how would one report an adverse event to the FDA for a cosmetic product. For consumers and health professionals, there are 2 options: electronically via the MedWatch online, or via paper submission for consumers that would be with FDA 3500B, or for health professionals via Form FDA 3500. These forms are available on our webpage and can be emailed, which is what we prefer, or mailed to the FDA. You have instructions available with both these forms on how to submit as well as where to submit these forms. For industry responsible person, there are two electronic submission pathways available, which is ESG or SRP. I'll talk about both in a minute. And also the option for paper submission, which is Form 3500A, again available, downloadable, and fillable from our web page with instructions on how to fill and submit. For MedWatch Online, again, for health professionals, that would be 3500, and for a consumer or a patient, that would be Form 3500B. If you access these forms, you can follow step-by-step instructions and prompted questions, just like you would fill a paper form, and as well as looking at the instructions, how to fill the form. Now, if you are interested in acknowledgement of receipt by FDA, please make sure when you fill these forms to enter an email address to receive acknowledgement. The key information needed or that FDA uses in these adverse event reports include the affected person, like name, contact information, demographics, and general health information. There's also value to what the product was and the manufacturer itself, the product codes, identifying marks on the label or container. Any pictures you can provide of the product or the packaging is very helpful to the FDA, as is when the product was purchased as well as where. Also important information that FDA can use is the actual adverse event itself to describe what the adverse event was, the symptoms, the onset, if it stopped using, when you stopped using the product, as well as any medical treatment or intervention that might have been had with the associated product. For industry, as I said, there are two electronic submission pathways available using the 3500A form. The first option is electronic submission gateway, where submitters who have database to database transmission capability, they can submit directly in an XML format. I apologize, my mouse seems to be very sensitive. The pro to this option is multiple adverse event reports can be submitted through one submission. If industry is interested in using the electronic submission gateway, we recommend that you contact our FAIRS eSub team, and they will be able to help you manage that process. The other electronic submission pathway that we do have is the safety reporting portal. This is suitable for companies who don't have that infrastructure of an ESG. In order for you to be able to submit a safety reporting adverse event report, if you are industry responsible person, what you would need to do is to first register an account, and that would be done by contacting our FAIRS eSub team. You will need an SRP account before you can actually submit an adverse event report through SRP. The submitter will just enter individual adverse event report manually into a web-based paper 3500A form. The pro to this option is free, so there is no added cost to the end user. There's important information that we would like for people to take away when you're filling out a 3500A form, or the sections in specifically G6. If you are an industry responsible person reporting a serious adverse event, please make sure to check the 15-day box. If this is an initial report you're making to the FDA, please make sure to check initial. If you're doing a follow-up, make sure to check that follow-up and put the number of the follow-up. If you're industry responsible person reporting a voluntary, non-serious adverse event, please make sure to check the non-expedited or periodic box. Also important for us is that you enter the information in section G7, which is a list of adverse event terms that most accurately characterize the adverse event described in the narrative in a different part of 3500A. That would be in block B5. The terms we would appreciate you use should be listed first. Most important term comes first. The terminology that can be accepted as standard terminology, such as MedDRA codes, a verbatim term, or manufacturer's own terminology. Now for section G8, while we don't have a mandatory format for the manufacturer report number, we do recommend for cosmetic adverse events and strongly encourage you to use a numbering system that provides unique information of that adverse event that you report, such as a year, the company name, or a case report number. There are reasons why we receive incomplete submissions and we have to go back and reach out to the industry's responsible person. And some common reasons are the wrong form was used, or if you're submitting via email, the attachment was forgotten. Also, the industry responsible person forgot to choose either 15-day or periodic, like I said in section G6. You have to remember that this form is not made solely for cosmetic products. So this also is for other FDA regulated products. So if you see a field that does not apply to a cosmetic product, you can leave that blank. The other thing to remember is, as I said earlier, on the SRPE submission, the form basically aligns with the 3500A paper form. When you're registering for an SRP account, you have to remember the name and contact information that you provide under the responsible field should match the corresponding information that you show on product labels. I'd like to pivot just to speak a little about the FAIR's public dashboard for cosmetic products. In September of 2025, FDA published the public dashboard for cosmetic products that contained releasable information on voluntary and mandatory cosmetic AERs that the agency received since 2001. So it's all the way from 2001 to present. The dashboard is updated daily. It can be accessed either via our FDA MoCRA webpage or the FAIR's webpage. Important feature of the FAIR's Cosmetics dashboard is it is searchable and it's downloadable. What is important, and a caveat that I would like to point to, is that the data that is presented in that dashboard has limitations. The existence of the adverse event reports for a cosmetic product in FAIRS does not mean that the cosmetic product caused the adverse event. Importantly, the FAIRS data is not an indicator of the safety profile of the cosmetic product itself. Make sure when you're using this public dashboard for cosmetic products to read the disclaimer as well as the FAQs and instructions on how to use it. With that, I come to the concluding slide. We have a lot of useful information. Also, as you saw on Megumi's and Elizabeth's slides, these will be available to the listeners. I would like to take a minute to thank the staff in the Division of Cosmetics, as well as in the Office of Cosmetics and Colors, and the Office of the Chief Scientist. I would also like to thank all the listeners who are here today, and Rakesh Raghuvanshi for helping us put this all together at this Grand Rounds. Thank you very much.